It's all right. The banner, his plaque. I'm sure there'll be more. My designation of our first assistant public defender, Kathy Houtman. But please stay, everyone in the awards group, stay so that we can take photos after. So I just want to say that to maximize our time, after the next presentation, each of our panelists are going to be following each other in order of the program. So there'll be no further introductions. Reminder again, at your table there are index cards. The good news is you heard a lot about challenges this morning. We're going to talk about how we're going to be addressing them and plans that are already underway and things that we're already doing. So there is hope. There's great things going on in our community. Again, jot down your questions. At the end, we'll have Q&A. And I wanted to let you know that all of the segments are being videotaped. The videos and slides are going to be posted to our website at yorkbar.com. And the first segment featuring Judge Trebilcock is also going to be live streamed. So if you have to leave the room, please go behind where the camera is going to be. But the York Daily Record, thank you for coming out today and covering and helping us get this important information out to members of the public. And I want to introduce now Judge Craig Trebilcock, who will be sharing information about Community Action for Recovery and Diversion, the CARD initiative, that's the acronym. This is a coalition of stakeholders that has been formed over the past 18 months to coordinate better outcomes with the criminal justice and the medical and treatment communities in York County. Judge T's impressive bio is in your program, but most significant of all of his accomplishments, being a 30-year Army veteran, leading troops on the battlefield, achieving the rank of colonel, Valor Award recipient. Most significantly, he was involved in recruiting me to lead this role for the York County Bar. So forget all the rest. This is where we are today. And he's going to provide this overview of the CARD project, which is going to focus on the need for early intervention and systemic change to effectively address the underlying causes of criminal behavior. Last month, the York County Bar Foundation, our community's largest private funder of law-related programs, committed $40,000 in funding to move the CARD project forward. It's going to take much more than that. But this is the first active investment in a new approach to justice and public health. And we are working on plans to encourage others to join us, those whose interests align with ours. This is a pivotal moment for York County as we believe the long-term results of CARD will be transformational, and the benefits will ripple outward, from workforce development by removing barriers to employment, to breaking down silos among all of our agencies, to enable public programs and the court system to work more efficiently. Ultimately, more families will be stabilized, public safety will be improved, and millions of taxpayer dollars will be saved. So, Judge? One more order of housekeeping for all of our speakers. The clicker is here. Please don't walk off with it when your turn is over.
Thank you, Victoria. Distinguished guests, supporters of the Bar Association and Foundation, friends of the justice system, thank you very much for inviting me here this morning to share a few comments with you. On behalf of President Judge Adams, I'd like to make a few comments about the state of our court system and where we're going to be going in the future. The discussion is about the CARD system, but to discuss the CARD project, we have to back up a little bit and talk about how did we get to this point. For 20 years, York County has been a leader in the treatment court realm. Started by Judge Blackwell, driven forward by Judge Kennedy. We found through data over the past 20 years that treatment courts are a more effective, more economic way of delivering justice in the community. We have a large number of treatment courts in York. We've been a statewide leader in this regard. We have a veterans court, we have a DUI court, we have a drug court. Recognizing a special challenge with heroin and opioids, we set up a treatment court for that population. We have juvenile treatment courts, we have a mental health court. I may have forgotten one, but that gives you the general picture. Earlier this year, Judge Prendergast began one of the state's few family drug courts because we recognize the spillover from the criminal justice system into families. We have kids in the back seat of cars when their parents are passing out in the front seat using drugs. And those kids are going to grow up to become new problems in the community and the justice system unless we solve the issue as a family. So we recognize in the justice system and through these treatment, or sometimes we refer to them as wellness courts, that the old approach of you did something that broke the law, we're going to lock you in a room that has some brick or stone walls, and somehow you're going to come out a better person, doesn't work. That system was set up approximately 3,700 years ago in Mesopotamia. You're a bad person, we're going to lock you in a box, and when you come out, somehow you'll be a better person. Now, I am not by any means a lightweight when it comes to the enforcement of criminal justice. I am the last judge you want to be in front of if you hurt people, if you're dealing drugs for money, if you're making my community unsafe. You do not want to be in front of me at the time of sentencing. So this is not about kissing criminals on the cheek and saying, it's okay, honey, you're not going to be held accountable. In fact, the treatment courts are also called accountability courts. They are putting people through a greater level of treatment, accountability, responsibility, requiring them to get a job than the normal justice system does. How does that pan out in terms of results? Well, I'm a regular criminal court judge as well. I deal with everything from shoplifting up to murder one. And for the people who come through the regular court system, not just in my court, but statewide and nationwide, the success rate is measured by individuals not picking up a new charge within the next 3 years, that's how we measure it, is a 45% success rate. Now, unless you're playing baseball, frankly, that's pretty lousy, all right? In the treatment courts, the success rate is 80 to 90%. Twice as effective. It's also cheaper to use the treatment courts. For example, in my veterans court that I preside over, it costs $1 to treat a veteran and get them back paying taxes in the community, back with their family, as opposed to paying $3 to incarcerate them for a year in the York County Prison. So back when I was at the War College, I was taught to question things, to not assume that the way we've always done things is the right way to do things. There's a great quote that I learned at the War College. It's from Mark Twain. It was that it's not the things you know for sure that are going to get you in trouble. It's the things you know for sure that ain't necessarily so. And I thought about that, and I thought, yeah, that's pretty much true. It's the things that you assume are absolutely the ground truth that aren't true that will get you in trouble. And our ground truth forever has been, if you take people who have mental health issues, addiction issues, who have somehow become a problem in our society, and you lock them up, somehow that's going to solve our problem. They also taught me at the War College to ask this question, and then what? You always have to ask that question, because when we put somebody in jail, unless they did murder one, they're coming out someday. They're coming back out into our community. So I looked at all these factors and asked myself this question. We have such great success in the treatment courts. It's cheaper. We have such lousy results in the general criminal justice system. Why don't we take the principles that we do in the treatment courts and apply them across the entire criminal justice system? Seems like kind of an obvious question. And as we explored it further, the answer was, why not? We should be doing this. When you talk to any criminal judge or prosecutor, they will tell you that plus or minus 5%, I've talked to dozens of judges about this, that it's really about 20% of the people who come in front of your bench that are what the general public would refer to as hardened criminals. They're the people who have gone out and robbed a bank, beat somebody up, committed homicide, are out there using physical violence, making our communities unsafe. Those are the people why we built prisons. That's why we have state prisons. That's why we have the York County Prison. Incarceration has its place. It enables us to get those bad people off the street and so we can sleep safely at night. But those same judges will tell you, and I will tell you after 8 years on the criminal bench, that 80% of the people who come in front of my bench are people who have mental health issues. They have substance abuse issues. They have a combination of both. And they are not hardened criminals. They are people who need treatment to not continue to violate the law. And the treatment courts have recognized that and deal with it. The general court system has not been so great at that. Let me see if I can, do we have my slides loaded? Yes. Keep going the wrong direction. You never want to give a pointer to a judge. One more. All right, there we go. So what it indicates is the CARD project is not just a new program. It's not just the latest tweak on a pre-existing system. We're talking about a cultural shift here. And not a cultural shift within the Justice Center, not just a cultural shift within the judiciary. It's talking about a community cultural shift. We have significant public resources that are already in place to deal with these issues, but they haven't been well coordinated. And what I mean is, frankly, when the judges issue a decision, what happens next is very often invisible to us. I drop the gavel on someone and say, in the regular system, go off to treatment. But I don't know what happens then to that person until the next time they appear in my court because the treatment didn't work. It's almost tangential that the justice system and the public health system exist in parallel, but they don't frequently work closely together. The CARD system is to bring those two systems closer together. It recognizes that trying to fix these issues, we've been using the wrong tool. We've been using the justice system to try to fix what is a public health challenge. When you're using the wrong tool, you're not going to get a good result at the end. So for 40 plus years, we've had this so-called war on drugs. And what we've used is more mandatory sentencing guidelines, more imprisonment, more coercion, and more imprisonment to deal with what's a public health issue. All right, let me see if this pops up. All right, I got to click every time for these little things to pop up. Sorry about that. I'll be clicking my heart away. Now, the slide's far across the room, but what it sums up is what we see coming into the court on this so-called iceberg analogy, the visible consequences of crime we see in the court. People are doing burglary, people are doing assaults, people are unemployed. We have people at children and youth, for the examples I mentioned, using drugs around their children. And it's easy to lump all those people together under the same label. These are criminals, we need to throw them away. But what we know in the justice system, prosecutors, judges, and defense counsel know, is that there's a lot of different drivers, which are the reasons why people are engaging in this conduct. And that's what's below the water. And if you don't analyze it, and if you don't talk to these people, and if you don't figure out your background, you're not going to know what those are. And if you don't address those drivers of their misconduct beneath the water, that's why they're going to come back again and again and again. I have the same families coming in front of my bench in regular criminal court again and again. I've sentenced in the same family a grandfather, the father, and the son to state prison for drug offenses. What are some of those issues? There is people being victims of sexual assault or physical abuse while they're children. That doesn't excuse conduct, but it explains that it needs to be addressed. Mental health issues. I have people all the time who are bipolar. They go off their medication and they commit an offense. Do they need jail time or do they need to be back on their medication? Now, we can continue to put these folks in jail, but the taxpayers have to pay the baggage for that. Would the taxpayers rather pay $33,000 a year to have somebody locked up in the York County Prison who's bipolar, or would they rather have them back on their medication at the cost of a prescription and be back with their family and working and contributing to the tax base? I think it's the latter, and I think that's smarter. We all recognize the challenge that the county has had, and the state and the nation, over the opioid issues, heroin and opioid. This slide shows that over the past 6 years, the average has been, since 2013 to the present, 93% of the drug deaths in our county have been heroin related. No jail cell has ever stopped an addict from getting out of jail and continuing to use. Only treatment works. And people don't just decide to use heroin and opioids because they're sitting around looking at a lava lamp and listening to Led Zeppelin, okay? And I think that's the image a lot of people have. These people who are using heroin are veterans who are injured during deployments. These are high school athletes who had a back injury or a knee injury and were put on Percocet prescription for 2 years by a doctor who wasn't thinking it through, and then they lost their insurance and couldn't afford the pills anymore. But now they're addicted to the pills, so they turned to street heroin. These are homemakers who had an injury. They were T-boned at an intersection, same situation, addicted to the pills by a prescription, and then they lose their coverage. So looking at all these factors, we went back to our justice system. That red bullseye shows you 10% of people we can bring into the treatment courts, where we dig down into these underlying drivers. They've been sexually assaulted, they have mental health issues, we can get them to treatment. That other 90%, which is represented by the blue, those people have the same issues, but we don't deal with it. They also have addiction, mental health issues. They're out there shoplifting to support their habit, but they may not meet the qualifications to come into the wellness court, or we may not have capacity. CARD is to help address those other 90%. Let's talk numbers for a second. We have about 4,500 to 5,500 new people, not cases, people coming into the justice system every year. So we can put 10% of them potentially into the treatment courts. That means, what, 3,500 to 4,000 people are not getting that high level of treatment or intervention that we can provide them. We don't have to get too wonky on this slide. What I call the zones of failure are basically our criminal justice system has certain steps that people have to go through before they get in front of Judge Trebilcock or some other criminal judge. And basically that amounts to, by going through these procedural steps from getting arrested, preliminary hearing, arraignments, applying to get into the treatment courts, 5 or 6 months pass. If you have a heroin addict who is not getting help for 5 or 6 months, one of two things is going to happen. They're going to die. So we saw those slides about York County drug deaths. That's partially attributable to those delays. Or they're going to pick up more charges during those 6 months, so we end up having to send them up to state prison. I know a lot of our representatives and our governor are concerned about the number of people being sent up to state prison, the number of people being kept on state parole, because it's expensive. The way to prevent that is not just looking at it on the back end in terms of, how can we get people off of parole once they've committed the offense. You have to look at the supply side end of issues as well. which is how do we prevent them from going to state prison in the first place? And this now gets into the basics of CARD. It's case deferral. Instead of intervening after 6 months when the person has picked up too many charges or they've dug such a deep hole for themselves that we can't help them, we're going to intervene right away. We're going to take them from the police car to a deferral center where they're going to be given the opportunity for help on day one, not 6 months later. The police and the magisterial district justices, the guys who are closest to the ground dealing with this every day, are absolutely frustrated by not being able to resolve issues with people who are chronically picked up for mental health issues. And they know that jail is not going to deal with those mental health issues. That we've all heard the stories about the person who is revived after ODing 2 or 3 times on the same day, and the EMT crew or the police play catch and release with that person. This will help intervene earlier and get those people into treatment. The veterans, the homemaker, the ex-high school or college athlete. These people are not worthless just because they have addiction issues. Addiction is a medical condition. We need to deal with it in a public health manner, not simply label people and throw them away. So what this slide indicates is they'll be given the opportunity to go into treatment. The DA is on board with this. Several of our major local police departments are on board with this. And what we're going to do is, if they will agree to go into treatment, get back on their medication, go into drug treatment, the DA's office is willing to either not bring charges, or if charges have to be brought because they have a prior record, if they will complete treatment, then the charges will be dropped. A different approach to the administration of justice, because no jail cell has ever cured anybody of mental health or substance abuse issues. Now, if they don't follow through with their treatment, they're going to get charged, and they're coming through the regular justice system. Accountability. This is not just feeling sorry for people. This is not being soft on crime. It's holding people accountable for their actions. It's injecting what it makes sense to solve a problem rather than using the wrong tool repeatedly. Oops. I'm not going to get too wonky on this. We're going to set up a wellness and deferral center. We found that with people who need treatment, whether it's mental health or substance abuse, that sometimes their issues are not, why they don't succeed, are not a criminal mindset or even a lack of will or willingness to deal with their particular issue. It can be other challenges in life. There's what I call the big 3 that cause people to fail. Lack of affordable, stable housing, lack of transportation to get them to all these appointments we set them up with and to go see their probation officer, and lack of financial stability. We're going to make people be accountable. We're going to make them get a job. We're going to help them rebuild their lives. If you provide those stable foundations, people can succeed, and we can stop the endless gerbil wheel of running people through the justice system at great expense to our taxpayers, our county, and our state. So the benefits of CARD are it's an evidence-based approach to reducing recidivism. It is to start knocking down the silos that have precluded coordination in the past. Let me give you one example, not picking on anybody except our own court system. We found out in our own court system that on the criminal side, we have a contract with certain providers to provide assistance and treatment to people in the court, and the family court division had their own contract with different providers, basically doubling our potential expense and cost by having 2 different contracts. We didn't talk to each other. We didn't know that we had 2 different contracts. And this exists all across the spectrum in York County. We have lots of great programs, but some of them are duplicative. And it's very often driven by funding streams. It's what I call the tyranny of the budget, right? Everybody needs to meet their requirements. They have to satisfy their funders. So they set up certain programs but the organization down the street may have the same exact program. We need to be coordinating more, not competing with each other. CARD will be a force multiplier with the coordination of the justice and public health system. It's weird to have a judge up here saying this, but I will measure success by our working ourselves out of a job in the justice system. We need to be deferring cases out of the criminal justice system to the public health system. That will be a marker of success. Our goal for CARD in the first year in 2020 is going to be deferring 10% of the cases out of the justice system. That's the goal. It may be higher, it may be lower, but that's going to be the goal. Early intervention, we know, saves lives and raises public safety. This is not just a guess. Judge Kennedy proved it with the Target 25 program with the DUI courts. In that zone of failure, that 6 months, that people were waiting to come into court, people who were chronically picking up DUIs picked up their second, third, and fourth DUI and were killing people. And were requiring us to put them in state prison. Judge Kennedy proved by early intervention and by putting people on ankle monitors, they stopped picking up their second, third, and fourth DUI, and we were able to treat them and make them successful. Finally, the CARD parameters. We're going to focus on the drivers of criminal conduct, not just look at the criminal conduct and react to it. We're going to be proactive, not reactive. It's not a replacement in the criminal justice system for punishing criminals who engage in violent behavior or who prey on others or who have no interest in reforming their antisocial behavior. I'll still be there waiting for those individuals. We'll take care of them. Don't worry about that. CARD is an accountability program that allows persons who have run afoul of the law to address their underlying social, public health, and trauma issues that are often a catalyst for criminal behavior. To put meat on the bones of that observation, I preside on the Heroin Opioid Wellness Court. 80% of the women who are in my Heroin Opioid Wellness Court have been sexually assaulted. 80%. Tell me there's no connection between that and the fact that they're heroin addicts, right? Those of you who are providers know what I'm talking about. And this is assaults before they became addicts, all right? They were assaulted, some of them as young as age 9. So now they have a warped sense of what proper relationships are. They have no self-esteem. They don't know where they belong in life. So when you have no self-esteem and you don't have proper guidance, you have a tendency to drift towards negative influences in your life. And these people are smoking marijuana at age 11, they're doing coke at age 14, and then they're using heroin by age 17. Not because they're bad people, because they're victims of sexual assault. That's what we're going to be addressing. And as with the treatment courts, those who take the opportunity to improve their situation through CARD will reap a short-term legal benefit by getting their charges dropped. But the important thing about CARD is they'll obtain long-term life benefits by getting reinstated to a stable life, stabilizing their families. Their kids will not be coming into juvenile court because they won't be in broken homes. That's the force multiplier that I'm talking about. We're going to save money, we're going to provide better services, and we're going to reduce the number of people that are being put into the justice system, which is the wrong tool. So I'll be sticking around afterwards to answer any questions, but I know I've stolen enough of the time already, so I'm going to end my comments at this point. Thank you for the opportunity.